Thank you. It's grading season, isn't it? I appreciate that. Look, good evening and welcome to a special night for us at the UVA Center for Politics. I know you're here to see and hear Senator Sanders, so let me introduce the distinguished host of tonight's conversation with Senator Sanders. I think most of you know Robert Costa. He's one of the country's most respected political journalists. He's an Emmy Award-winning national correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning, my very favorite show on Sunday. Well, except for Face the Nation, since that's headed by a UVA person. I almost goofed there. He's also the chief Washington analyst for CBS News. He's a best-selling author who's been a regular guest anchor on CBS Evening News, CBS Weekend News, as well as Face the Nation. And next week, and this is really significant, Robert will receive the National Press Club's highest honor, the Fourth Estate Award. He received, yes, that's right. He received his bachelor's degree with honors from the University of Notre Dame, second only to the University of Virginia in prestige, and a master's degree in politics from the University of Cambridge. But most important of all, remember this, he's a scholar with the UVA Center for Politics. We're going to be giving out a lot of A's this semester, no question about it. Please join me in welcoming the distinguished Robert Costa.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. It's a real honor to have you all here to welcome Senator Bernie Sanders. He is a leading progressive voice in this country, in the United States Senate. He has been running a Fight Oligarchy tour throughout the country that has gotten so much attention, enormous crowds. And so tonight you get to hear from him about his message, about his movement, and about his latest book, Fight Oligarchy, which has been a huge success. Senator Sanders tonight is going to come up here in just a moment and make opening remarks to introduce himself, his message, where he is right now in this country, where he wants to see it go. And then we're going to have a conversation here on stage after he finishes. I'll integrate some of the questions from students into that conversation. But please give a warm UVA welcome to Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Bob, and let me thank all of you for coming out this evening. And I look forward to the discussion that Bob and I will have, and I look forward to hearing some of your questions. My message tonight is that our country faces perhaps more significant challenges right now than we have faced since the Civil War in this country in the 1860s. And there are a whole lot of converging challenges that we've got to meet. And I have to tell you that your generation is going to have to be the generation to stand up and to help transform this country. So here are some of the issues that I worry about, that are not talked about very much. And one of the points that I'm going to make tonight is that sometimes the most important issues that we face get the least discussion. And one of the issues, and I've been going around the country talking about it, wrote a book about it, is that we live at a time of more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country. And that's not only an issue of fairness when you have one person on top owning more wealth than the bottom 52%, when you have the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 93%, it's not just an issue of fairness, it is also an issue of power. So it's not just that we have a few people with incredible wealth, we have a small number of people with incredible power. We have now more concentration of ownership in our economy than we have ever had in the history of this country. In sector after sector, a handful of giant corporations control what is produced, the prices you pay, and how workers are treated. On Wall Street, we have three major Wall Street investment companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, that combined have 95% of the shares in almost every major corporation in America. They're the major stockholders in every major corporation in America. Incredible wealth in the hands of the few, incredible power in the hands of the few. But it's not only an economic issue, it is a political issue, because people with wealth and power also want to control the politics of our country. And democracy today is not only being challenged and undermined by Donald Trump, it is also being undermined by the fact that we have a corrupt campaign finance system as a result of Citizens United, which allows the wealthiest people in this country to pour unlimited amounts of money into both political parties. So you got, as one example, the wealthiest guy in the world, Mr. Musk, spending $270 million to elect Donald Trump as president, and having made that investment, gets rewarded with the most important position in government, head of DOJ, and decimates many government agencies. But it's not just the Republican issue, it is a Democratic issue as well. Billionaires put a whole lot of money into Kamala Harris's campaign and a whole lot of money into the Democratic Party in general. So, massive income and wealth inequality, massive concentration of ownership of the economy, significant control of our political system by a handful of billionaires. Add all of that together, that is what we call oligarchy. And throw in the fact that these oligarchs also significantly own the media, what you see here and read. Not an accident that the wealthiest people in this country, people like Mr. Musk, owns Twitter, or X, that Mr. Zuckerberg owns Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram. Larry Ellison recently was able to buy CBS, that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. So to a very significant degree, these very same extraordinarily wealthy people control what we hear, see, and read. So we got a problem. What's the answer to the problem? The answer to the problem is that we have got to organize in a way that we have never organized before at the grassroots level. And we are beginning to see that all over this country. People are looking around and they're saying, how come I can't afford health care? How come I can't afford to send my kid to college? How come I can't afford rent or to buy a house? How come I cannot afford grocery, decent food for my kids, while the very richest people are becoming richer? And what we are beginning to see are candidates from coast to coast beginning to run for office and saying, you know what, this country, our political system, our government, our economy belong to all of us, not just the few. So that is the theme of the book. That will be the theme of the discussion. Look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Sanders, for those opening remarks. Fight Oligarchy is not only a book, it was the outgrowth of a tour that you began in the wake of President Trump's victory in 2024, galvanizing working people across the country. What are the lessons learned from that tour? You were at the lectern in front of not only crowds in blue states, but red states.
In fact, we concentrated, Bob, on red states. We did go to some blue states as well. But the main focus was, in fact, to go to red states. And one of the places we went to was in West Virginia, into a county where Trump got 74% of the vote. And the reason that we launched that campaign, and I was joined for a while with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the reason that we did that is we felt it imperative that with Trump assuming power, having been elected, and every day doing one or another outrageous thing, consolidating power, acting in unconstitutional and illegal ways. And the American people will say, what's going on? Who's fighting back? And they weren't seeing the kind of opposition that was needed from the Democratic leadership, so we hit the road. And what we found in speaking to, I think we went to 23 states, maybe 35 events, speaking to well over 300,000 people, is what we found, interestingly, is it was not just Bernie supporters who were coming out, not just Democratic supporters coming out. We had a whole lot of Republicans and a whole lot of independents. And I think in seeing what Trump was doing, people were starting to think, what kind of nation are we becoming? And I remember, and one of the things that galvanized me, I was at Trump's as a senator inauguration. It was indoors because of the weather. And for whatever reason, I got kind of pushed to the front of the line, and I was in the front row, just a few feet away from where Trump was inaugurated. And right behind him were the wealthiest people in the world. You had Mr. Musk over there, Mr. Bezos over there, Mr. Zuckerberg over there, and behind them were another 15 billionaires who Trump had nominated for various government agencies. So I think the American people are out there looking and they're saying, wait a minute, 60% of us are struggling to put food on the table. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We can't afford health care, can't afford housing, and now you got a government which is run by billionaires. And honestly, what I thought when I was sitting there, and I made this point throughout the tour that we did, is you all remember Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, a few days after that horrible, bloody battle, which was an enormous step forward in the fight against slavery. And Abraham Lincoln, where the blood is still on the ground, people had just died a few days before, he said, in so many words, our vision, that these guys did not die in vain, that what America must be is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Very profound statement. That's what this country is about, not complicated. We back in the 1770s, very brave people, Thomas Jefferson, your neighbor here, helped lead a revolution, shook up the entire world. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now you have in Trump a government of billionaires, by billionaires, and for billionaires. I think people are looking around, they want opposition. Where do we go from here? So the nature of, that's kind of what galvanized that tour, is to show the world, show America, that there was massive opposition to Trump's agenda.
Senator, when I covered your tour, I encountered many members of the labor movement showing up to your events, saying they really feel frustrated about their situation in the country, their own economic pain, the cost of health care. What's your assessment as a leader in this country, in the U.S. Senate, about labor and where it should go from here?
We need some major reforms in the labor movement. I happen to believe very strongly that we are not going to be able to transform this country without a very strong labor movement. And in the last some years, we have seen at the grassroots level some really strong efforts by folks to organize, to join unions. And I trust everybody understands that what a union is about is the understanding that one worker alone does not have the power to take on his or her boss in terms of decent wages, decent working conditions, decent benefits. You can't do it. A lot of these folks out there, these bosses, these corporations, are incredibly greedy. They make huge profits, but they want more and more and more. I was just on a picket line last week in New York City with Mayor-elect Mamdani, and we were working with Starbucks workers. So you have a company that makes billions of dollars in profit, paid its CEO $96 million for 4 months of work at the end of last year. Got all kinds of money, and yet they're paying their workers starvation wages and providing terrible schedules for these workers. And we're seeing that all over the country. So I think people understand the importance of joining unions. I think we need to have a revitalized labor movement. which leads the direction in transforming this country and creating an economy which works for workers and not just the 1%.
You mentioned Mayor-elect Mamdani. What will define success for him next year once he takes office, especially in terms of a democratic socialist government? You were a former mayor for a long time in Burlington, Vermont. What will it take for him to be successful in your view?
He has an incredibly difficult job. I mean, I just met with him a few days ago. And I think it is fair to say, as people have said, that being mayor of New York City is maybe the second most difficult job in the country. I think what would define success is not only keeping his campaign promises. Now, one of the issues which is true for New York City, it is true for Vermont, it is true for Virginia, is the outrageously high cost of housing. And what he said is going to stabilize rents in rent stabilization buildings in New York City. And the concern there is that working class people can no longer afford to live in New York. So keeping that promise and doing that is important. He campaigned on an issue, again, which is problematic, not only in New York and Vermont, again, all over the country, and that is the child care crisis. What I believe, what most psychologists will tell you, is that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important years in terms of intellectual and emotional development for a human being, right? 0 through 4. Stop for a moment and think what our child care system looks like given that reality. You would think that in the richest country in the history of the world, which is what we are, that we would say, my God, we have got to have the best qualified, best trained, best educated people to be working with our little kids. They have to be paid really, really well. The facilities have got to be great. And it's got to be affordable because we want it available for every parent regardless of income. Well, needless to say, the reality is very different, just the opposite for that. So he has talked about what exists in other parts of the world to making childcare in New York City free. And I think he's exactly right in doing that. He's talked about making bus services free also. And he has talked about using city funds to build grocery stores in underserved areas, which I think is also very important. The thing, what amuses me, Bob, is those were the main tenets of his campaign. And people say, wow, this guy is really, really radical. Oh my God, far left socialist.
You've heard these things before yourself.
I have. But the theme of what I want to try to get through to every person in this room tonight, it's what Mamdani is talking about, what I talk about, is not radical. All right? What you should be thinking about, what we all should be thinking about, is that what is radical is if one person in America owns more wealth than the bottom 52%. That is really radical and crazy. What is radical is that you are living in the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child. That's really radical. That's extreme. What is also extreme is that 70 years ago, I don't know about the University of Virginia, but in major public colleges and universities all over this country, do you know what tuition was? Anyone know? 0. And now I expect that many of you, the young people in this room, are going to be leaving school deeply in debt. And the reality is that many working class and lower income kids basically cannot afford to go to college, have given up their dream of going to college because of the high cost. That's radical to say that our young people have to leave school deeply in debt if they go to college, or that millions of young people cannot afford to get the education they need. That's radical. So the main message I think that Mamdani was trying to get out, and that I try to get out, is to say you are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. There is no rational reason why everybody in this country should not have high-quality health care as a human right. There is no rational reason why we should not have the best public education system from child care to graduate school. Not a radical idea. But what we have got to break through, really break through, that is the hardest thing to do, is to break through the mentality out there is that we are some kind of a poor country, that we need austerity, that we can't afford to do this. There is nothing that we cannot afford to do if we have rational public policy. Okay, that's the main message that I try to give all over the country. It's what Mamdani is talking about. It's what I believe.
Thank you, Senator. Most of us watched Mayor-elect Mamdani's victory speech, and there was a man he mentioned at the beginning of his remarks, Eugene Debs. Now, this is a name some here might know, some might not. Senator, help us understand why in 2025 Eugene Debs matters, especially in the context of a lot of people say Bernie Sanders came out of nowhere. Well, he came from a tradition. What is that tradition, and who is Eugene Debs, and why does he matter?
All right, let me ask for a start. How many people in this room have heard of Eugene V. Debs? Great. Well, that's I can't see it that
A
clearly.
lot of arms. Not
that's
enough
great.
probably for you, but enough.
I asked that because in the 1970s in Burlington, Vermont, I was invited to an event at the University of Vermont. And, you know, we were talking about stuff, and I asked the students there how many ever heard of Debs, and a lot fewer hands went up than I saw here tonight. In my view, maybe along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Debs was one of the great figures in modern American history. If my memory is correct, at the age of 14, he went to work on the railroads, and he moved his way up the ladder, and he became an official in the railroad union. And he helped eventually bring a lot of what was called the craft unions together to form the American Railway Union. And there was a big strike, don't remember exactly the year, the late 1800s, Pullman strike. Bob, you remember when year, what are we talking, late 1800s?
He's a tough professor.
All right. Anyhow, it became a nationwide strike.
I don't know if I'm going to be a fellow here anymore.
Debs was arrested for his activity. He went to jail. And in jail, he started reading. And he came out as a committed socialist. And he helped form the Socialist Party at that time. He ran for president on 5 occasions. And I think was a very inspirational speaker and a great writer. I recommend all of you to read some of his speeches and his writings. And, you know, it's very, very powerful stuff, talking about so long as there are people in jail, I am not free. And talking, many of the things that he talked about then are as absolutely relevant today as they were back then. So his goal was to reach out, to organize people. And remember, he said, you can have anything you want so long as you want it. Stand up and fight for it. It's yours. All right? That's what he said then. And he, toward the end of his life, when he was older, he gave a speech during World War I. And it was implied that he urged young people not to participate in the war. And he was arrested. He was sent to jail. His health deteriorated in jail. I wanted mentioning early before we got up here, he was almost a Christ-like figure. Everyone who met him loved him, even if they disagreed with him politically. One of the things that blew me away, and it's just almost hard to imagine, here's this guy in his 50s or so, politician, you know, running around the country. He ends up in jail. And when he's in jail with hardened criminals, this was a federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia, his character and his humanity came out. So that when he was released, pardoned by President Harding in 1920, I think, right? He was released. All of these prisoners go to the walls, go to their bars and start banging on the bars to express their love and affection for this guy, which was really quite extraordinary. So it's not just as a political figure. He was apparently, those who knew him personally saw him as a guy who would give the shirt off his back, a very, very wonderful human being. But he spent 3 years in jail because of his opposition to World War I. His views were right. It's a war that we should never have gotten into. But he becomes an inspiration because he says to working people all over the country, organize, stand up, fight for your rights. And if you have a vision, then he said something also, Bob. He said, you know, he was the leader. He was a great leader. And he said something in so many words, I'm paraphrasing rather badly. He said, if I, Eugene Debs, can lead you into socialism or anything else, somebody else can lead you out. It's not me, the leader. We don't need great leaders. We need mass democratic movements of people. And that was an extraordinary vision. He says, I don't want to be a leader. I want you to stand up and fight for economic justice, which I thought was rather extraordinary.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. It's really worth reading more about him to understand where Senator Sanders' movement comes from and the tradition in this country of democratic socialism. So often it's characterized as some kind of random thing recently, and there's a rich history. But moving from the past to the future, Senator, you have been focused in recent years, especially in the last year, on artificial intelligence. When you look at AI, where do you see both the peril and any promise?
Here's what my worry is now. Let me ask a question. Give me an honest answer. Don't tell me or Bob what we want to hear. How many of you feel comfortable that AI and robotics will be an asset, a positive thing for working families? Please raise your hand.
I don't see any hand.
I
Well,
see-
one
I
or
see a
two.
couple.
Okay.
How many of you see that they may have, those technologies may have a negative impact on working people? All right. Bob, I first saw this, and the answer was that almost everybody is concerned about it. I first saw this, I was in Davenport, Iowa, a number of months ago. I asked the exact same question, working class audience, and the same exact response. So here's what I think. The first question that you've got to ask yourself is, who's pushing AI and robotics? And we know the answer. The answer is that the wealthiest people in the world, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman, other multi-billionaires, Peter Thiel. It is a technology in which the very wealthiest people in the world are investing hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in research and development. So the first question that you have to ask yourself is, okay, what is their motive? Are these guys doing it in order to improve life? You know, people will tell you truthfully that AI is going to have some positive impacts on healthcare, et cetera, and it will. But what is the motive of these guys? Are these guys investing all of this money and their energy in robotics and AI to improve life for ordinary people? And I think you got to be out of your mind if you think the answer is yes. So why are they doing it? Well, one of the things that AI and robotics will do, and we're beginning to see it just right now, and there are studies out there that tell us what is going to happen, is that AI and robotics may, nobody knows for sure, wipe out tens and tens of millions of jobs. So if I am into manufacturing and I've got a factory, why do I want to hire you as a worker at $25 or $30 or $40 an hour, have a union maybe? Why do I have to deal with you? You're calling in sick, you're injured. Why do I need that when I got robots to do the work? And you're seeing Amazon now, I think half of the entities in Amazon warehouses are now robots, and they're going to increase that. But it's not just manufacturing and robots. It is also a lot of white-collar jobs as well. And one of the scary things, not to get the young people here nervous, is that we're seeing now an uptick in unemployment for college graduates, because many of the entry-level jobs that young people gravitate to and get as they move up the ladder in the economy are now done by AI. So you have people like Musk and Bill Gates and others who know a lot about this, who are essentially saying, this is what they are saying, is that work, W-O-R-K, work itself will be phased out. That there is virtually nothing over a period of time in which AI and robots will not be able to do. So that is the economic impact. Now what happens, it reminds me very much of the phrase, I suspect you've heard of it, the operation was a success. Unfortunately, the patient died. So you can have a very efficient economy where you got AI and robotics doing everything, doing it well, doing it inexpensively. Unfortunately, what has happened to the human beings? That's number one. Number two, what I worry about. I worry, and we're into a brave new world here, which nobody knows the answer. As human beings, I am, Bob is, and everybody in this room is. You are who you are because of your relationships with other human beings. Your parents who raised you, your friends, your family, your schoolmates, your coworkers, everybody in this room. We impact each other. We are who we are because of how we relate to other human beings. Well, as I'm sure all of you are aware, and I hope we get some questions on this, there are studies out there right now where teenagers are spending a very significant amount of their time, not just as part of their schoolwork, and that's a whole other issue the teachers worry about, but emotionally. They're getting their emotional support. They have, quote unquote, friends who are on ChatGPT. They got problems, they talk to ChatGPT. What does it mean if a human being gets their emotional support and their friendships from a non-human entity, and at the same time becomes increasingly isolated from other human beings? Over a period of time, what does that mean? In terms of AI and robotics, another side impact is, and you're seeing it right now in Ukraine, politicians, leaders, sometimes hesitate to go to war because they don't want the body bags coming back. It's not good politics to have thousands of your young people get killed. What happens when robot soldiers are doing the fighting? In Ukraine right now, on both sides, you're seeing drones playing an increasingly active role. We are not far away. Elon Musk talks about his desire to build millions and millions of robots. Some of those will be able to engage in combat. So you're going to have an arms race in robots. What does that mean in terms of countries more likely to go to war? A couple of weeks ago at Georgetown, I had a discussion with a fellow named Jeffrey Hinton. Some of you may know who he is. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics a couple of years ago. He is often called the godfather of AI. He's the guy who did the initial groundwork 40, 50 years ago. And he said, I asked him the question, well, will AI become smarter than human beings? And the answer is, yeah, of course. The question is when. It will. And then the next obvious question, which used to be a science fiction narrative, is, well, what happens when AI does become smarter? Will human beings literally be able to control the planet? So it used to be kind of a joke. People like Jeffrey Hinton, who, again, knows a lot about this, in fact, is very, very worried about that. So you asked me about AI and robotics. It is transformative. It's going to have an unbelievable impact on every aspect of our lives. I can tell you absolutely that Congress is nowhere near beginning even to address the issue. The media is not talking. I mean, they are. CBS, by the way, is doing a bit on it. But I think the enormity of this issue and how it's going to impact every life and our kids' lives has not gotten the discussion that needs. So it's an issue that my office is working hard on.
Thank you, Senator. This leads to a question from one of the students here, Taylor Reith. a fourth year studying foreign affairs, who says, in terms of human interaction, the dignity of the person, you began your career in local politics. What are your thoughts on the decrease of engagement in local politics, and what can be done to increase engagement at that level in civics?
Look, what we are fighting for right now, and we are on the defensive in our country and around the world, is democracy. In my state, every March, there are town meetings, and people, and most of the towns in Vermont are really small, 500 or 1,000 people. People come out, and they sit in a room, and they argue about how much money they should spend on the schools, on the roads, et cetera. They raise their hands, and they vote, and they make decisions. That's called democracy. I worry very much that we are losing the foundations of American democracy. And of course, Trump, in my view, does not believe in democracy. It's not an accident that he has as his very good friend MBS in Saudi Arabia. And it's not just that that guy is from a trillionaire family. That is the kind of government I think that Trump believes in. It's autocratic, it's run by the very, very wealthy, it serves the needs of the very wealthy. We got that. That's a real problem. But in addition to that, I think, and what I worry about very much, is that if government does not respond to the needs of ordinary people, people say, you want me to vote. Hey, Bernie, you want me to vote for you? But what do? I can't afford groceries, can't afford housing, can't afford to send my kid to college. And you want me to vote for you? What are you guys doing? You're not doing anything. What the hell? And a lot of people voted for Donald Trump because Trump said the system is broken. Give me power. Give me power. Now, what Trump does is make a bad situation worse. He's a demagogue who tries to divide us up, calling people from another country garbage, et cetera, et cetera. All right? But there is a frustration all over this country, and if you would ask me the origin of Trumpism, it is that people are saying, I can't afford anything. What are you doing? Except, talking and talking and talking. Do something. And people are in trouble in this country. The country, in many ways, is broken. We can't even provide the basic necessities of life for the vast majority of the people, while the people on top become much richer. The people say, you want me to believe in democracy? You want me to participate? Give me a break. I got other things to do with my life. I got to try to see if my family can survive. So you got all of these things, but the bottom line is, not only here, but in Europe, Latin America, tremendous pressure against democracy, and we have got to fight back. That means getting involved at every level. We are right now in our political organization literally training thousands and thousands of people on how to run for school boards, city council, state legislature, trying to provide financial support when we can. So the fight now is not only what you believe in, the fight is whether or not we are going to preserve a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we need everybody's involvement in that struggle.
Thank you, Senator. So many of these questions submitted from attendees tonight could be boiled down to one particular word: stress. People feel stressed in America about the costs of healthcare, food, and other issues in their lives. You have spoken about stress in many of your speeches across the country. What would you say to those here tonight who feel stressed about their own lives?
You ain't alone. A number of years ago, when I was chairman of a committee, I brought a number of physicians on a panel into our committee. And the question that we asked Bob was about life expectancy. As some of you may know, despite spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other country, our life expectancy is about 4 years shorter than it is with OECD countries. And importantly, and virtually never discussed, if you are working class in America, your life expectancy is significantly shorter. In fact, in the book, we talk about how in McDowell County, West Virginia, I visited there some years ago, It's one of the poorest counties in America. It is, I think, 4 or 5 hours away from Fairfax, Virginia, which is a wealthy community. If my memory is correct, the gap in life expectancy is something like 15 years. All right, so why do poor people and working class people die at a younger age than wealthier people? Well, the obvious answer, if you have the money, you got good health care. If you are working class or low income, you may not have any health care, you may have a high deductible, be underinsured, et cetera. That's part of the answer. But it is not by any means the full answer. And the full answer is what you just talked about. And when we do town meetings, that's exactly what I often focus on. To be working class in this country today is to live under enormous stress. And what the doctors at that hearing told us is that stress translates into all kinds of physiological symptoms, heart problems, emotional problems, and a variety of other problems that they can see. And it's not hard to understand. If you are worried today about how you're going to pay your rent at the end of the month, if you are worried what happens when your car breaks down, you know, if you got money and your car breaks down, you take it to the mechanic, oh God, $1,000, too bad, you get it fixed. If you don't have that $1,000 and millions of people don't have it and your car breaks down, what happens? How do you get to work? And if you can't get to work, you're not going to have a job, and you don't have a job, how are you going to take care of your family? If you have no health insurance, so you have a $10,000 deductible and your kid gets sick, what do you do? What do you do? So all of that stress on people literally results in people dying at a much younger age than they should. So in our country today, I mean, not just the economic stress, and you got the political stress, and I talk to young people who are saying, you know, I'm not going to have a baby. You know, get married, we're not going to have any kids. Why are you not going to have any kids? Well, we're worried about climate change. We're worried about AI, what that does. You add all that stuff together, there is a lot of feelings of powerlessness. How do I confront all that? What am I going to do with AI? How can I deal with climate change? How can I deal with a president who doesn't respect the Constitution or the rule of law? And all of that adds up. So stress is a major problem. And I want to get back to a point that I'll make over and over again this evening, is all of these things sound overwhelming, these problems, and in many respects they are. But the other side of the coin is that as human beings, if we work together, if we keep our eyes on the prize, we can create, and this is what democratic socialism is about. It is a very different vision. We don't have to have the highest rate of childhood poverty or senior poverty of almost any major country on earth. I helped write the American Rescue Plan. And just that one piece of legislation during the early parts of the Biden administration, one piece of legislation reduced childhood poverty in America by 40%. Okay? We can greatly expand Social Security. Right now, if you can believe it, over 20% of seniors, not talked about very much, over 20% of seniors in America are living on $15,000 a year or less. How the hell does anybody live on $15,000 a year or less? All right? We could rectify that. But that gets back to the nature of our political system and to what degree we live in a democracy or whether we live in an oligarchy. If you had a government that in fact represented ordinary people, you would have a situation where the people on top would start paying their fair share of taxes so that we could invest in the needs of low-income and working people, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, what needs to happen is we need grassroots activism, and we're beginning to see it. We talked about the trade union, and I'm on the phone every week, virtually every week, with workers all across this country who are trying to organize, who are fighting for decent contracts, who are telling their employers that they will not accept the kind of level of corporate greed which now exists. We're beginning to see that, but we need to accelerate that. So we're fighting for economic justice, we're fighting for democracy, we're fighting against authoritarianism. You got all that on the table. It's a lot to deal with, because that's, in my view, what we've got to do.
Senator, you brought up the American Rescue Plan. One scene I always think about is March 1st, 2021. You met with President Biden in the Oval Office and talked about President Franklin Roosevelt and the decision to go big in terms of the American Rescue Plan. Politics is about choices. One student here, Kessler Kreutner 80, asks about the recent elections where more Democratic centrist types were elected in New Jersey and Virginia. Of course, Mayor-elect Mamdani in New York. You are a historic independent leader in Congress, caucusing with the Democrats. As you look ahead to 2026 in the midterm elections and the choices Democrats have to make about who they're nominating, what they're talking about, what's your view?
Okay, what I learned, I am an independent, and I'm proud of that. When I was elected mayor of Burlington, Vermont, I beat a 5-term Democrat mayor. I caucus with the Democrats. But I will not tell you anything you don't know if I told you that the Democratic establishment is heavily influenced by big money as well. And we see that in many areas. And one area that we have seen it, and I'm proud to say that I and others are beginning to change that, is, Democrats talk a lot about democracy and justice, but the Democratic establishment for far too long was supporting the horrific war in Gaza and putting money into Netanyahu's military. And why did they do that? Well, they did it for a number of reasons, but do not underestimate the power of money and organizations like AIPAC spreading the money around and basically saying, if you don't support, give money to Netanyahu to destroy the people of Gaza. It's not the way they framed it, but that's the reality. We're not going to fund you anymore. So the issue comes down to, and I've said this more than once, Trump didn't win his election because his supporters wanted $1 trillion in tax breaks for the top 1%, which is what he has done. And he didn't win his election because he, through the quote-unquote big beautiful bill, is going to raise premiums for the people on the Affordable Care Act, going to double them, in some cases triple those premiums. And he didn't win the election by telling people he was going to throw 15 million Americans off of Medicaid. He won that election because I think in many parts of the country, people just don't see an alternative. And what Democrats too often do is say, hey, vote for us, we are not Donald Trump. And that's not bad, that's a good reason. But it is not enough. You need a vision. You need to stand, and what is that vision? That vision starts off with the belief that in a democratic society, we cannot tolerate so few having so much wealth and so much power, that we've got to take them on. And if you can't do that, if you can't make that statement, then it is really hard to really develop the program that you need. There was a poll that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Over 60% of the American people support Medicare for all. That's expanding Medicare to comprehensive. That's what the American people want. I've got 18 co-sponsors out of 100 people in the Senate on that bill. The American people want the billionaires to start paying their fair share of taxes, not to give them $1 trillion in tax breaks. So the point is, Democrats need to, of course, oppose Trump and authoritarianism, and I think to some degree they're doing a good job on that. But it is not enough. You need a vision that gives hope to young people, and that's what Mamdani did. One of the impressive things about his campaign, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think he won 75, 80% of young people, all right? And it's not just young people, it is working people. People understand the system is broken, and tinkering around the edges is not where I think people want, whether they are MAGA members or whether they are supporters of mine. People want a nation in which all of us can live in dignity. They want to make sure that we use AI and robotics to improve life for us, and not just make the billionaires richer. But the Democrats are not there yet, because many of them and the establishment are still heavily influenced by the moneyed interests.
Senator, you are one of the major political figures in this country, especially over the past decade. 2 presidential campaigns that galvanized and brought together millions of people across the country. But it wasn't always like this for you. You were a student activist in college. You toiled for years in Vermont, not always running successful campaigns.
That is an understatement, boy.
In the final few minutes tonight, it would be wonderful if you could reflect on the more than half-century of work in these fields, especially for the college students here and the community members too, about the theme of persistence and history, and about how things don't happen overnight.
Good. Actually, we have a chapter in the book on that, now that you mention it. You know, and it's important to know this when people sometimes feel a little bit pessimistic and overwhelmed. Well, I don't remember the year, but it wasn't so many decades ago. You know how many women there were in the United States Senate 20, 30 years ago? And at one period, there was one woman, Barbara Mikulski from Maryland. One woman, okay? How many women governors there were? Virtually none. Women senators, again, one. Members of the House, very few. And yet, because of the struggles that women and their male allies waged over the years, breaking down all kinds of barriers against women being second-class citizens, that changed very significantly. I am old enough to remember when, if you were black, maybe in Virginia, certainly in parts of the South, you could not drink at a particular water fountain or go to a school or go into a restaurant. But at the grassroots level and with great leadership, people like Dr. King and many others, people lost their lives in the struggle, and blacks and their white allies struggled to end segregation. There was a time in American history where workers had virtually no rights, where children were working endless hours in factories and in fields. Workers and their unions fought back. They created unions. Sometimes they were shot as they attempted, beaten up, trying to form unions. But they succeeded in forming unions. We still have a long way to go. Helped to create a 40-hour work week, help us get decent benefits, et cetera, et cetera. None of these things happened overnight. In my case, I ran in 1971. There was a special election. The senator had passed away. And I ran for the United States Senate, and I got 2% of the vote. And then a year later, I ran for governor, and I went downhill. I got 1%, et cetera. But the word is, sometimes, young people, I think, go out and they're on a demonstration. I was on a demonstration on Saturday and Sunday, nothing's happened. But understand, real struggle, does not happen overnight. And real struggle has everything to do with solidarity, the concept of solidarity. And that is not just, I was just last week there was an international strike against Amazon and Jeff Bezos all over the world. People were standing up and demanding that the second or third wealthiest person in the world who owns Amazon stop paying their workers there a decent wage. So the point that you are making is that things do not change overnight. And we got to keep at it. And I think especially at this very difficult moment in American history, and I really feel a lot of concern and sympathy for the young people. I mean, they're looking out there, and they're looking at movements toward authoritarianism. They're looking at more overt racism than I have seen in a long, long time. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, much more blatant. And I think Trump has brought out the worst instincts in many people. And you're looking at climate change, and you're looking at AI, you add all that stuff together. That's a lot. But you cannot live in despair. You cannot hide under the covers. These problems, in fact, are solvable. AI and robotics can be extraordinary benefits for humanity if they're used for all of us. I mean, we're already beginning to see some of the unions saying, you know what? Your technology is increasing my worker productivity. You know what? Pay us the same wages for 32 hours of work week. You talked about stress a moment ago. People are very often overworked. AI and robotics has the potential to reduce the work week and maintain the kind of wages that workers are getting or more. AI can make huge advances in healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. But the question is, who controls it and how is it used? Who benefits from it? So there is a lot that's out there. And again, to the young people, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that is not an irrational response to this period. This is really tough stuff. This is a tough period to be growing up on. And then for many of you, the young people, you've dealt with COVID and you got isolated, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the antidote is to reach out to your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers and your fellow students. Fight for a vision as to where you would like to see this country go, and be prepared to stand up and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and please give a very warm thank you to Senator Bernie Sanders.